All right, let's get started then. So we have you here, everyone else is here. So welcome to our first book club. Herzlich willkommen zum ersten Buchclub der German UPA. And we couldn't have a better guest for our book club than Steve Krug himself. So thanks so much for being here.
I'm very happy to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, we're looking forward to the discussion with you. So what will happen next is we will give a quick overview about the book, and then we will dive into a discussion with you. So I encourage everyone to be on camera, to ask questions, and yeah, be active in this meeting.
Yeah, please don't be shy. I find I am startled in these things. And you eventually realize that they really had a question they were dying to ask, and it took them forever to get up the nerve to actually click. So
yeah, couldn't phrase that better. Thanks so much, Steve. Yeah, so Steve, I will introduce you a bit. I will introduce your book a bit. So this is secondhand knowledge, obviously. Please jump in anytime when you have first-hand knowledge and correct me where I'm wrong. So obviously, you're a well-known usability consultant, an author, speaker in the field of usability and user experience design. You have written several influential books in the UX design field. You started your career in the tech industry in the 80s, as far as I know, working as a technical writer and video producer. And in the early 90s, you became interested in the web design field, which was emerging, obviously, and in the field of usability. And you began working as a consultant, helping clients to improve their user experience of their websites, as far as I know. And then in 2000, you published your first book, Don't Make Me Think, and which became an instant classic in the field of web design. So the book was widely praised for its practical advice and clear writing style, and it has been translated into over 20 languages, as far as I know. Yeah, congratulations. So in 2006, you released the updated version of Don't Make Me Think, and then in 2013, the third revisited edition was published, including new examples and new chapters about mobile design and accessibility. And that's not all. You also written other books, for example, Rocket Surgery Made Easy and Web Usability Testing Handbook, which are also both widely used and also hits, basically. So in addition to this, you're a frequent speaker at conferences and events like ours, for example. And you also taught workshops about UX and usability at organizations like Harvard University or MIT. And yeah, regarding your book, Don't Make Me Think, as far as I know, it has over 600,000 sold copies by now. And yeah, the book is widely considered as a classic in the field of UX. It's basically on every list, on every must-read list. So congratulations and welcome again, Steve. We're very delighted to have you.
Thank you. That was an excellent we have over here on MSNBC TV, which is the very liberal 24-hour news broadcast, which I listen to or watch. There's a woman named Rachel Maddow who always does this introduction to whoever her guest is, and at the end always says, "Now, tell me what I got wrong."
Exactly. That's my question as well.
And their answer is always, "That was perfect. You got everything right." I actually, in this case, it was perfect. I have two minor corrections. One is that Don't Make Me Think was not an instant hit. It took about 2 years and word of mouth for it to actually become to sell really well, which was great because I never expected to earn back more than the advance on the book to begin with. I wanted to have something out there so I could raise my consulting rates. That was my motive for doing the book. And it turned out after the fact, I learned that I could have raised my consulting rates anyway. So, but it was very fortunate for me. The other thing is, just so people don't go looking for a third book, there actually are only two books. You talked about Rocket Surgery Made Easy and Usability Testing Handbook, and those are in fact the same thing. It's called Rocket Surgery Made Easy, but just so nobody waste their time looking around for this third book.
Gotcha.
So, but I'm not perfect. I appreciate it. Thanks.
Yeah, which brings me to my next part where you can correct me. To refresh everyone's memory, I'll give a quick overview about your book. So again, please jump in anytime where something isn't correct. So yeah, we just talked about it. So there was this first edition in 2000, then 2006, the second edition, and 2013, the updated version. This is from your book itself. Basically, what happened in between here. So a couple of things happened. That's why you needed basically come up with a next version. Yeah.
Right.
So the book has 13 chapters. First chapter is about your first law of usability, and it basically introduces the concept of "don't make me think" what is it about, and which is the guiding principle behind the whole book's approach, basically. So what does it actually mean? Second thing would be, second chapter would be how we really use the web, which is, it gives insight into how people actually using the web and how knowledge can be, how this knowledge can be informed better design decisions. So in short, people don't read. This is one of the famous sentences, and they just scan the website. In the third chapter, you talk about Billboard Design 101, which is information architecture. It's really what is the most important information on a website, and then basically what's the information hierarchy on a page, or how you should structure information. In the fourth chapter, it's animal, vegetable, or mineral, which is goes back to a word game which is called 20 Questions. And it discusses the importance of making web content easy to scan and understand. And yeah, illustrates how users process the information. Fifth chapter is omit words or omit needless words. So it's about UX writing, which you would call nowadays. It's focus on the most important things and shorten it to the really condense it down. Mm-hmm. Sixth chapter is street signs and breadcrumbs. It's a whole chapter about navigation on websites and how to make it as easy as possible to get users to the information they needed or they want to find. Seventh chapter, Big Bang Theory of web design. So this is one you use the graphic here from XKCD, which is one of my favorite ones, by the way, which shows what is on the website and what the user actually needs. And this is basically a framework for understanding the key principles of good web design about simplicity, clarity, and consistency. Eighth chapter is the farmer and the cowman should be friends. So that focuses on the importance of collaboration, especially between designers and developers and the whole company, all other stakeholders, and how these different folks in the company can work together. Ninth chapter, usability testing on 10 cents a day, which is, you were confronted with the argument that usability testing is too expensive. So what can you do on a small budget? And this chapter explores it. This also goes back to the other books that you have written, Rocket Surgery, for example, made easy. So how can you do usability testing, basically?
Yeah, this then turned into Rocket Surgery Made Easy. It was an expanded version of this chapter. Yeah.
So 10th chapter is in the third edition, basically one of the new chapters, which is about mobile design. So it covers the importance of mobile devices and web design and how to optimize it for mobile. Mm-hmm. And 11th chapter is usability as a common courtesy, where you introduce the concept of Mensch, obviously for Germans very understandable, but here, this is one page from this chapter where you see the goodwill of a mensch when he visits a website or a mobile application, and by frustration, the goodwill basically diminishes. First chapter is accessibility, and obviously it discusses the principles of accessibility in web design and how you can implement it in an easy way. And 13th chapter is a guide for the perplexed. It's a practical advice, basically incorporates all the things that you have heard, why things cannot be done and how we can overcome these hurdles. And addresses these common obstacles, how you can implement UX in your company, basically. Yeah. So Steve, please jump in. What's missing?
Nothing. This looking at chapter 13 here, that's interesting because this is one of the things where this was written for a time when UX people still had a hard time winning arguments and had a hard time getting their opinions taken seriously, and particularly getting things done, getting changes made that they knew needed to be made. And so this was a little bit of advice on how to work in that environment. But that's actually, in many ways, it's not entirely different, but in many ways, obviously UX has a lot more credibility and sway nowadays than it did 10 years ago.
Yeah. So my question for the audience is, what are your questions for Steve? So please just raise your hand and then ask it. If you want to ask it in German, obviously I can translate if you want to. You can also use the chat. I'm happy to translate it or just read it, up to you. I would be interested in what is your, to the audience, what is your don't make me think moment, basically? So where have you used the book? What is your first memory of it? And for Steve, I got the question. So you said that in the beginning it wasn't a hit. So how surprised have you been by the level of success that it has now?
Initially shocked. It really took about 2 years for it to go down actually in the Amazon standings, because a lower number is better. And for sales to really catch on. So that surprised me. But the thing is, since then, it's been consistently pretty much the same for going on to 20 years now. So the element of surprise is gone.
I can imagine. All right, we have a question from Lawrence.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. Basically, my moment with your book was when I joined the online team of Dell in 2012. It was given to me as a present, so I read the second edition 6 years after it published. Mm-hmm. And my question is, why don't we have usability or UX as a school subject yet? What do you think?
Well, this may be a cultural difference, because I mean, it depends on what level of school you mean. Here, it's gone from there being like 3 university or college level programs, or it may have been as many as 10, but where one could study something like UX.
K-12, I mean, so
okay,
early on.
K-12, yeah. Okay. I don't know. I mean, my take on it would be, why isn't there a course in K-12 that teaches you how to balance a checkbook? Now, you may have one, but we don't. And there are like gaps in things that are very useful to know that many people coming out of high school here don't, haven't been exposed to. So I'm not surprised. I have had feedback that there are some K-12, not K-12. Here it would be 9 through 12 would be high school. Grade school, I don't know. I mean, I don't even know how much basic computer education is going on in grade school. Although the schools in the more affluent communities do have computers and they do have some form of computer education. But I'm not sure how much UX still seems like a little bit of a niche for what we call grade school here, which would be K through 8. But high school, I think it's started to catch on here. But I don't know. That's about as much as I know. I know I've had feedback from people who are teaching it in 9 through 12. But that's kind of all I know. I'm not surprised. I mean, I think there are many things one could teach in high school that don't really get taught, because it seems like it's hard enough to get people to learn the basics. Although I read an interesting article recently arguing that there was no point in teaching algebra because it's, you know, and the big joke is people always say, well, I've never used any of that since I graduated from school. And in reality, this article did a very convincing case for the fact that nobody does use algebra after they get out of school, and that it really doesn't teach you to think better, and that the time could be used better in other things. Now, personally, I loved algebra, but so that's all I know.
Yeah, thank you so much, Lawrence, for the question, and obviously Steve for the answer. Next would be Maria.
Hello.
Hi.
I actually only wanted to share my moment with your book, and I have to admit I have a nerd moment right now, because your book was my introduction to the field of UX and usability, which was in 2013, and I will never forget the moment when I was laying in the park, the sun shining, and I was reading your book, and I understood why it's better to write jobs and not career in the navigation.
Right.
I'll never forget that. So yeah, I borrowed it from colleagues because we had a usability study for the website I was in charge of back then. And it's so cool actually now to see that the book already focused on UX writing, because like 10 years ago, there wasn't a thing like UX writing, and now there is. And it's, yeah, because I'm focusing on UX writing. And yeah, and 2015, I was in a bar camp here in Germany, and I was an editor back then, and I was the only one. I was like, what am I doing here? Do I actually even belong here? Because I mean, writing and UX, and now there's a thing like UX writing. It's, yeah, this is just the thing I want to share, and I'm obviously a bit excited. Yeah, just thank you for the book, because the title actually is a mantra I'm always sharing in my writing trainings. Like there's a section like, don't make me think. If you only take one thing from my training, then let it be, don't make me think, because this will make all your texts better.
Thank you so much. Yes, the title worked out very, very well for me.
Yeah.
And in point of fact, I had another working title for it for a long time, and then discovered somebody else had already used that title, so it was lucky. But thank you. That was great. Actually, I love the idea that you were sitting outside when you read the book. It's such a nice image. What was I going to say?
I said a lot. I'm sorry.
No. Well, I loved it. Career. Actually, I never thought of career versus jobs. Actually, maybe that's in the example of the book. It's been so long since I looked, but career is like just off enough. You know, it's just confusing enough. About UX writing. So yeah, UX writing didn't exist at the time of the second edition.
No.
I mean, people were doing it, but there was no job description in UX writing. And so it's impressive to see how much that has come along. You know, I bet you know Ginny Reddish's book, right?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Because I hate to get out of talking to any group of people without recommending Ginny Reddish's book, which I'm going to blank on the name.
Letting go of the words.
Letting go of words, right? Letting go of the words. There's a second edition. She actually completely revised it for the second edition. So if anybody wants to get it, get the second edition. But it's the best book about writing for people reading online. It's so good. And she's actually a great person. Fortunately, I know her. So anyway, yes. Well, I'm glad I got you into it. I always, when people started coming about 5 years ago, people started coming up and saying, well, I got into UX because I read your book, or because I was forced to read your book in a course or whatever. And my first question was always, are you having a good time? It's like, I was sort of wanting to make sure that it had worked out well, that I wasn't sending people off into some miserable career. So
Yeah.
Thank you. That was great.
You're so welcome. Thank you.
Yes, Steve. Thanks, Maria. Thanks, Steve, for the answer. Yeah, don't make me think it really became a catchphrase in the industry. So, quick question: how do you make this feel? How do you feel about that?
How do I feel about the fact that it's a catchphrase?
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel great because it's you know, I mean, I did deliberately say this is what. And at the time, it was what I was always telling clients, you know, and I said, this, if you're going to do one thing, then this is the mindset you should have, which is that you're not going to confuse people. You're not going to force people to try and figure out things that, and one of the nicest things was that when I first put it out there, wrote it, I thought, oh God, there's going to be, you know, online, there are going to be people saying that this is like anti-thought, you know, that this is and about dumbing things down. And the nice thing is that basically everybody is, at least everybody who opened their mouths, understood that it meant don't make me think, parentheses, about things I don't need to think about, you know, and that was very gratifying. So yeah, no, it's been great for me, and it's part of what kept the book selling. So
nice. Thanks. Melissa, next.
Melissa? Oh,
okay.
Yeah,
hello everyone. Yeah. So hi Steve. Hey,
hi.
Matthias, thanks so much for the opportunity. Steve, it's a pleasure to be here talking with you. So my first contact with your book, it was in about 2005. Like I worked in a Telefonica company, a Spanish Telefonica company that was Terra Networks at the time. And today I work at Dell Technologies. I'm also a teacher in a university here in Brazil. Yeah, I have your book here in a Portuguese version. Very nice. And so I use it a lot. So it's always my book that stays beside my computer here, and I also use it a lot in my classes, and also convincing my students to buy your book because it's like a Bible for usability. So it's amazing material. And Steve, a question that I have for you, it's a little tricky, but it's something that's happening today. So we are in a situation, digital situation, so a world is globalized, right? So I work with different teams, and I have users in many different countries, and today I'm dealing with difference of cultures. So I have many users in China using our interfaces, and their understanding of interface is really different from our understanding here, Americans and Europeans. So my question to you is how to deal with those differences. Would it be possible to design a product to have a an interesting appropriate approach for everyone, or we have to just adapt and to look for those differences, and design to perspective for those users? So what are your thoughts about?
It's a really good question for which I do not have a really good answer. I have obviously thought about the question for a long time. I don't spend that much time thinking about it because every time I sort of look into it, my conclusion is there's been almost nothing really great written about this, and it's a challenging problem. The closest I can come to, if I was working on it, would be and then that's I have found recently some articles online that seem to take an interesting approach to it. But I don't have references for any of them. But you know, I suppose everything you Google and keep looking. But what happened in the beginning, people wrote books, and sort of the most that you got out of the books was, in some cultures, the symbol for a mailbox. In other cultures, that same symbol means a trash can. So be careful. And that was like the level of advice you could get from most of those books. It was not very helpful. That, and that you need to be sure that your text, particularly your sort of navigation, fixtures text, fits in the space that's allowed for it, and when it gets translated into other languages. I was talking to somebody about this the other day. A friend of my wife's here from Germany, and I realized that I had read not that long ago that this whole, and you obviously all can give me good input about this, that for many years the story was, be careful of German, because German will be so much longer than English. And I read something recently that basically demythologized this and said that while some technical terms, you may string together 5 words in a technical term, but that on average, if you did the math, that on average, or common German translation of something is not going to be that much longer than English. Anybody have a feeling about that? Is that? I mean, you're working in Portuguese, so Melissa. So
yes,
you're not
almost in English, but also in
maybe
Portuguese.
after you and I are done, somebody
I
can
speak a little bit of German.
I can chime in on that. So we usually count a 1.5 expansion for German, but also for Portuguese when it comes to translation from English.
Yeah.
Depends on the, I would say, character of the text.
Yes. Yeah. So the more technical it is, I assume, the longer the expansion.
Not necessarily, because technical terms are usually similar, but like marketing texts tend to be just longer because of the sentence structure and grammar.
All right. Well, I'll have to find that article and see what their references were. But, it was interesting. Anyway, but back to your question about internationalization. I don't know of any good books. There may be one by now. I actually haven't looked for that for about 3 or 4 years. Because I mean, I figure for people who are doing that, who need that, then they'll find it. But and I can't offer any better advice. There was a third thing besides the mailbox and the length in other languages. Was my own feeling about it is that you want to have somebody in that culture to work with you. So you really need, same way if you're doing usability testing of your site in another language, you need the person doing facilitating the usability test needs to be somebody who is at least a very fluent speaker of that language or a native. That the subtleties are going to get lost in translation. And so I would think sort of the same thing in terms of internationalizing your content, your navigation, and whatnot is. Your best bet is to work closely with somebody from that culture and get actual on the ground feedback about any differences. I have no feeling for how, say, what were you referencing, Chinese or Asian in general?
Yes, Chinese. Yes,
yeah.
We have one person there actually. Yeah.
Okay, and
it helps a lot.
I have no feeling at all for what Chinese websites are like. So.
Yeah, they like lots of buttons in one screen. It's just everything. Yeah.
Okay. It's
really different.
I mean, from my perspective, it all comes back to usability testing. I still think the best tool in your tool belt is watching people try and use the thing. So if you can watch a few people try and use your design, from that culture. And with a facilitator for the test, who is his native speaker or whatever, then you'll learn a lot about to what extent you can get a feeling for. Well, yes, we may not be doing exactly the way they want it, but is it troublesome for them or not? I mean, and maybe they're fine with it. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Great, thanks.
Helps a lot. Thank you so much, Stephen. Congratulations for your work. Thank you.
Thanks to both of you. And next is Michael.
Hello. Sorry, great for having you, Steve. So my aha moment with your book is that I read it on the plane from Frankfurt to Denver as a pre-read for studying at the University of Colorado, and I forgot it on the plane. I had to buy it again because it was after, like shortly after 9/11, and everything that was left on the plane was destroyed. So they didn't allow, they weren't like keeping it and handing it out to people who told that they forgot it. But I happily bought it again because it was really helpful at that time and ever since. So my question is around the thinking, and I work at Microsoft. I'm a UX designer here. I work a lot with the inclusive design team, and just this last week we published our inclusive design kit for cognition. And as part of that, I do also a lot of work around how people think and how much thinking they can do as part of their daily work. So how do you think has people's thinking in digital environments changed over the past, let's say, 20 years? Like how much faster, how much more, or did you see any other trends in the way people think when they use digital technology?
Yeah, it's a good question. Oh, and you're in the cognition wing of what's the term? What's the overriding?
Inclusive design. Inclusive design.
You're in the cognition wing of exclusivity, and which is really interesting because cognition, you know, designing for cognition, especially lower level cognition, is really tricky. And I'd be interested to hear what your recommendations are, because it just seems so hard. I know, again, Ginny Reddish was one of the original people in the plain language movement, and you know, there we're basically trying, you know, she's one of the, she and another friend of mine are like, have written articles about, forget about reading levels. Reading level analysis is like useless, the tools that do reading level analysis, but the cognition that reading is much trickier than that. So how do you write for people who you know, whether through age or other things are cognition is more of an effort. Have I seen stuff change? I think what I've seen is, you know, I started off in 2000 saying people don't read nearly as much as you think they do. I mean, that was the message for designers, was whether you think that people are actually going through and you're laboring over every word carefully with the picture in your head of somebody who's reading it carefully. And you gotta start to understand that that's just not the way it's working. And I guess if anything, I've seen it through my son actually is in UX now, and he's working to keep me honest, and and you know, he's describing the difference between these micro generations. I think people are paying even less attention. I think people have now, they're so good at moving fast that they move even faster, you know, and they really do think they can multitask, which is really scary. So I think that's the only thing I understand about the trend, is that if anything, it's accelerated in terms of people paying less attention and jumping to conclusions faster, which is the scary part, you know. So I don't know, how's that compare with what's your experience? Well, you obviously spend all your time thinking about this. Yes,
well, quite a lot. And the one thing that strikes me the most, like I also do a lot of smart buildings, and the one element that a lot of people wanted smart buildings is smartphones, apparently. It's really weird because the building is smart, so I still need a phone that is smart as well. But the interesting fact is that just having your smartphone lying next to you face down decreases your brain capacity by 10%. Because we're so much into, we constantly want to check if there is news coming in, right? And you would have to put it in your bag so that it's really out of everything, not within your reach. And that is something that a lot of people don't just realize how big that effect is. Yeah. And smart, I always tell, like in smart buildings, you don't want to have zombies running around with their smartphones and bumping into each other. You don't want them to do things on a smartphone when you're sitting in front of a 30-inch screen. So why should I use my smartphone if I have like 10 times the size in front of me?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of education I have to do in getting people's understanding of that thinking is a scarce resource in the office environment, especially. And people may do wrong decisions. People may do wrong calculations or may write something wrong if they don't have full capacity of their brain. And therefore, designing for that state of not having your full brain capacity available, that's something I'm doing more and more often now.
That's great. I love that. My image for it is that I always think that we've got all these loops running through our heads constantly. We have a certain set of loops that we just get. They're our set of loops. And you're saying that having the phone adds another loop or two or three that are running, that it's like when I go into the whatever the resource manager for my Windows desktop, it's like there's a certain percentage that's being
Task
allocated
manager.
task manager. It's being allocated to those loops, now that wasn't 10 years ago. Interesting. Yeah. Cool.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. Thanks again for both of you. And next is Edie. Hi.
Hi, thank you so much. Yes, so it's just really great to connect with everyone here. I'm a brand new member of the German UPA, so thank you for arranging this. And I'm relatively new to UX as well, so it's very exciting to
Welcome.
be able to ask a question
Great
and
to
be
have you.
present. Thank you. Steve, I want to thank you for making the content easy for anyone to understand. And it's really entertaining. I'm sure you've heard that a lot. But I think you did a great job of illustrating your concepts, both with words and images throughout the book. And I come from a psychology background. So the chapter on testing was really wonderful. I'll definitely be advocating for regular testing.
Yeah.
And my question for you would be, because I'm switching into UX as a career, what would be your greatest piece of advice for someone new to UX? Thank you.
Ooh. So are you already in it? Do you have?
I am actively searching for my first role. Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, then I guess my advice would be patient and don't worry. It's getting into it has turned trickier in the last like 3 years, because it went from a point where they were desperate for people to a point where they were still desperate for people to build out, but they didn't have enough senior people to mentor new hires and people entering the field. And that's the tricky part. And that's why all the ads you see are for senior people, because they're desperate for senior people. But don't let that discourage you. There are actually some great articles about that on Medium.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have been reading about that.
Yeah, and I find that they are pretty sane and pretty responsible and potentially helpful. But I would say the biggest thing is don't freak out. It's just hard, and there are those structural reasons why it's hard. It has nothing to do with you. And I guess all of them give the advice of, yes, even though they say that they want a junior person who has 5 years of experience,
right?
Forget that. Don't worry about it. Just go in with what you've got and talk about what you've got, and don't worry about it, because that's just nonsense. That's just nonsense, because the descriptions were passed along from the people who actually need people to the people who write the ads and who understand nothing about the job and nothing about it. So you just want to get your foot in the door and do some interviews. But if the interviewing may go well and you may still not get hired, you have to keep plugging.
Yeah.
And find the right niche. Other than that, I mean, that's a lot of advice for somebody who, on my website, it actually says in my FAQ, if you're writing for advice on getting into the high-paying field of, UX, and then I'm the wrong person to ask, because I found a piece of advice about how to do that a couple of years, maybe 5 years ago, And the advice was, don't ask somebody who's like, been in the field for a long time. If you want advice, ask somebody who, 3 years ago was in the position that you're in, and you'll get actually timely advice. Then my experience, I mean, it wasn't a profession back when I got in. I know nothing about how to get in, really, from personal experience. So, but you could cultivate some people who have been in it for a while, and that's all I know. So,
Thank you.
It's a really nice field.
I'm looking forward to it. I'm really excited.
It's interesting work, particularly you coming out of psychology. You'll find it interesting, and the people in it tend to be very nice.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Welcome.
Yeah, thanks. We got a couple more questions in the chat, but I have a question for the audience, another question. So what we went through all the chapters in the beginning, and my question for the audience is, so what are still the challenges of implementing Steve's principles? So this is something that you find particularly still hard to do. Yeah, please share. Then we got another question from Lucas. Steve, can you remember your last aha moment in your work?
Oh. I know I've had one or two within the past year, which is surprising because I'm not big on aha moments. I tend to sort of think what I thought 20 years ago. I'm trying to think of what. Let me pass on that for now and see if one comes back to me, which is likely.
Yeah, we got another question from Tanya, which is what's one thing in the book you're not that happy about?
Well, the nice thing is that there aren't that many. The thing I'm probably least happy about is in the third edition 10 years ago, as you mentioned, I added a chapter about mobile and web app, mobile apps, and mobile sites, and I needed to do it. I added in replaced some of the old examples with examples from mobile apps, and I needed to do it because at the time the book was starting to look pretty old because basically everybody was working on mobile, and it had been written originally about desktop, and so I did it, and I wrote a chapter, and I admitted in the chapter, I said this is I didn't say this is not a great chapter, but I tried to come as close to it as I could. Because I didn't feel like things had settled down enough around mobile at that point 10 years ago for me to say much that was useful about doing usability that was different from doing it on the desktop. I mean, a lot of the issues are still exactly the same, but if I was going to write a chapter specifically about mobile, then I needed to say things about mobile. And there wasn't much that I felt like I could say definitively about differences in mobile. So that was probably what I was least happy about. I felt like the chapter, I felt like it wasn't a terrible chapter, and it was of some use to some people. So I didn't feel really bad about it, but that was, if I had one thing that I felt like, that's really the only thing. I think everything else, I kind of like. I mean, I'm kind of a person who I did filmmaking. I was trying to do animation when I was in college, like 100 years ago when I was in college. And I was always the person who, when our film came back from the lab, because it was film, it was actual film at the time, and it came back from a lab a couple of days later, I was the person who would load up my film in an editor or projector, and I really liked it. So I was always happy with my work, whereas everybody else was like just critical about their own work. So I've always liked that book.
Yeah, thanks so much for sharing. We got another question from Jennifer. So I'm a bit longer, so I'm reading. Thank you for writing these books. They're amazing. I have a question about remote research. I love it, but there's one thing that I'm wondering about.
Yeah.
Do you have any recommendations about how to make team members join in on research sessions when it's done remotely? Because it's hard to create a team feeling comparable to the one in a lab. you don't have snacks, you cannot exchange glances, etc. Any ideas?
It is. That's one thing that's missing. Actually, the Rocket Surgery Made Easy book really needs an update in that part. I think most of the rest of it I would still stand by. There's a couple of things I would change, but remote testing had caught on with the cool kids when I did Rocket Surgery. In other words, the people who had been doing usability testing for a long time had started to do remote testing, because it had reached the point where the screen sharing software and everybody had a good high-speed connection that you could do remote testing. And the people who did it discovered that it worked almost as well as in person. It can work really well. But one element that is missing is that, sitting behind the two-way glass and eating snacks and having all these side conversations. And you don't really want to do that when it's online. I can't actually see a way that you can emulate that online, because you want people to be paying attention. You want people to be paying more attention than they would if they were having side conversations. Although I don't know, maybe people can multitask better than I think they can. But what would happen in the conference room was you would always keep the side conversations as short as possible, or unless you were a jerk. And people would shush you if you were interrupting there, paying attention to what was going on with the user. And so I don't know. Whoever asked that question, did you have any thoughts about it? Anybody else have any thoughts about it? I don't know how you do that, and I certainly know you don't do it by adding virtual reality to the observation room.
So anyone, please chime in here if you have anything to share regarding this. We will just move on in between to Maria.
I would say one thing, which it is where a lot of the learning it takes place, is in the exchanges of insights between people and questions and qualifications. And so it puts more emphasis on having, I think one way to compensate for it would be to have a debriefing session immediately, just keep the same room open, bump the participant, and have a conversation right after, while everything's still fresh in everyone's mind, about things that they noticed or questions that they had or whatever. So spend another 15 minutes doing that. That might be one way to compensate for it in some regard.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks. So again, if anyone has something to share regarding this, please chime in. But different topic from Maria. So regarding my question,
yes. So you asked about the challenges while implementing the principles of the book, and I think this one really breaks the heart of every UX professional. The people in the companies who either don't know about UX or don't want or cannot take the user's perspective, so that sometimes you have more work advocating for UX or actually explaining why you do the things you do, or you said that they're not implemented at all. Yep. Because they are discarded. Yep. And I don't know if it's an issue, I guess, for every UX professional. I can only speak for the UX writing. So yeah, this is like, it breaks the heart, because you do everything for the user, and working for the user actually means you can improve conversion rates, you can improve the income and the so actually everything you do is for the good, and then you see that other people think they know better. And that's really, it's breaking the heart, because you know that on the other side the user is frustrated because the app, the interface isn't working as it could be working.
I'm trying to think of was advice for the what's it called, the chapter on being a man, not being a mensch, Guide for the Perplexed, making usability happen where you live. chapter, I tried to address some of that, which and at the time, people paid far less attention to UX people than they do now. You know, I mean, it depends on the organization, it depends on the department, depends on the management. But the fact is, if you had a graph of overall, how much more does UX get listened to and their opinion taken seriously, it's a dramatic uptick now from the last 10 years. But you know, your mileage may vary at your company. It may be hard to get people to pay attention or listen, or in particular get past their own biases and act on the good information that you're giving them. So again, there's a bunch of reasonably good advice articles on this out on Medium, but I think you want to, you know, you say, okay, so if you have facts, if you have before and after conversion rates, or, you know, anything that sort of seems like facts, then you have to think of what clever ways you can use to get these dramatically in front of these people, which I'm sure you've tried. But the other thing is to actually get them to watch users, to actually, whether it's by sending them clips from, you know, send them one clip from a usability test that shows this, you know, that this is not working. They may watch one clip. They may not want to watch a usability test, but they may watch one clip. And it may have some impact on them. And the other one is, if they're intransigent, then do an end run. You know, I mean, the best thing you can have is some advocate somewhere. You know, so I don't know if you have an advocate now where you are, but it may be that your advocate doesn't need to be the boss. It may just need to be your boss working his or her way up through the.
Thank you. Yeah, the good thing for me is sometimes I'm the advocate because I'm external. I'm a freelance writer.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So I'm the one who can write the guideline.
Yeah.
Which can be handed in-house. So yeah, so but it still breaks my heart if I see that, okay, some things the team cannot implement.
Oh yeah, imagine what it was like 20 years ago when nobody listened to you. And nothing ever changed.
Yeah, but I like the idea of showing the video.
I always tell people that people would ask me, well, how do you manage to survive with the fact that nobody listens to you? And I said, well, my take on it has always been, I'm not going to be upset that this stuff didn't get fixed for all the various reasons that stuff doesn't get fixed, but I'm going to count on the fact that the people who I worked with on that project will know more going into their next project, and that's my contribution. You know, it's like, here, if I can't get things fixed. So, because it doesn't pay to get discouraged about it.
Thank you both. We got another moment to share, Lawrence.
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to comment on what Maria said. So I think it's pretty true that some people making the decisions, they need facts, they need numbers, they need KPIs going up, be it as an NPS or CSAT. What we often see is that when a solution is made, which is, well, to our point of view, mediocre, the request is, yeah, but do customers really comment on that? Is it really that bad? And then we have to come up with customer verbatim and analysis, comparison to competitors, how they do. So there's always this, as you just said, the need for seeing the customer struggle in a web session or in usability test, and to abandon and give up in order to realize what is good.
That is the kind of thing that can change people's minds. It's almost the only thing. Like I say, if they're intransigent, it's kind of the only thing that can change people's mind. If you can show them undeniably, here's an actual customer, and even to this person observing it, it makes sense that that person was really frustrated and that that's a bad thing. Yeah. So, plus, as you suggest in there, make friends with people doing the analysis. You know, make friends with the bean counters who can provide you with stats on your changes. So,
thanks. So please, Steve.
Oh no, I was just tossing it back to you.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, we're coming slowly to the end of the official meeting. I will keep the Zoom meeting open, so if someone wants, can hang out here afterwards. Before you leave, if you have to leave, you can stay. Before you, if you have to leave, please, there's a link in the chat. Please rate this event, give us feedback. It's all about giving feedback in UX, so please rate the event.
Great.
So,
and besides, could you, in case I forget, can you send me the chat transcript after the fact?
yeah, sure.
I often forget to grab that. So
happy to do that.
Okay.
So obviously there's one question, I guess you get this asked a lot, and we already had this question in the chat. So when is your next book coming?
It's a good question, and one I have to in my own interest, I have to say I don't know, and I wouldn't be at liberty to say if I did, because if there was ever going to be a fourth edition of Don't Make Me Think, then it's the kind of thing that you don't announce in advance, because as soon as you announce it, people stop buying the third edition, and so,
right.
So it's an admission against interest. So which is not to say that there would be a fourth. It's an update is a huge amount of work, particularly when things when A, things have changed, but B, you still believe everything you said in the first place. So I have no idea when, if ever, there will be a new edition. I actually spent a couple of years working on a book about writing, because I've always said that I hated writing and found it really hard. And I do find it really hard. So I've spent a lot of time trying to find ways to make it easier. And I realized years ago that I had learned some things, and I thought I could do a very nice book about making writing easier for yourself and for your readers. And I put a lot of time into that, and have been off of it for a while now, mostly because of COVID and other things. But I may do that someday. So don't know, but I appreciate the interest. And I, by the way, I can stick around until like 10 after if anybody wants to hang in, because these are good questions, and
that sounds great.
I have coffee, so
thanks, and lunch hopefully. Yeah. So one more question would be: so what's your take on the future of UX?
Well, it's all going to be done by chatbots.
Yeah, we just had this question in the chat here. So what's your take on ChatGPT and AI?
Yeah, no, I think there's no doubt about it. We're all going to be out of work.
Seriously?
No, I'm a long-standing successful IA denier. I've been following IA since like the 80s, and I always liked the fact that it was always 15 years off. Now at this point, some bits and pieces of it are not 15 years off, but people have finally understood that it's unlikely and undesirable that we're going to do full IA, where we have some kind of technology that's as intelligent as a person, maybe a dog or a horse, but that's hopefully that's an unattainable goal. But they have figured out how to do some things, and the problem is, as soon as you figure out how to do some things and they're impressive, that people get too impressed with them, and then they think that those things can do things that they can't. So that's what we're looking at right now, is that, and I find this really dangerous myself. I think, but I'm basically I'm a partial Luddite at heart. I mean, I will say here, if nobody repeats it, that I wish social media had never been born. I think social media has been like one of the most destructive forces in civilization, and and will continue to be so, because it's hard to see how you reverse it. But certainly it's totally screwed us here in the United States. And from the people I know, I don't see where it's made people's lives better in any way that measures up at all against how bad it's been. So I have sort of the same feeling about people getting really psyched about this kind of IA. Now, that's not to say it won't be useful. I mean, I can see, I've read a couple of articles about people using using chat IA for UX purposes. And it makes sense, you know. I mean, if say, tell me what the market is, you know, tell me who the market leaders are for this particular service. You know, that's great. It can do really good sort of somewhat meta, you know, Google searches for you and summarize information that would take you a while to do. And there are a bunch of things like that that it can do well, but I'm worried about people getting carried away with it. And the fact is, there are parts of what we do designing UX that can be formularized. I mean, you know, there's no question about that. But are those the important parts? And does that mean that there's no place for all the people who are working on it now? I think there's plenty for them to do. Word processors didn't replace writing. You know, it's like so. Anyway,
thanks for the answer. But that's something.
Do me a favor and forget I said any of that.
No, it's an interesting topic. This is something. So we will close this official part right in a bit, in a moment, and we can talk about this afterwards. Obviously, there are many studies that have proven you right, that how harmful social media can be. And also on the other hand, obviously there are pro arguments like connecting protesters and so on for other cases.
Keeping families together, connecting.
Exactly. So
yeah, absolutely. It's not like there's no good come from it. It's I don't think good stacks up against the bad.
Exactly. So long story short, we're at the top of the hour. We're at the end of the official book club here. Again, stay in the chat if you want to hang out afterwards and continue that. My hosting will end here. It's just an open conversation afterwards. Steve, first of all, thank you so much for being here. Thanks so much for your contributions to the industry for this evening. So thank you so much to the audience, everyone that joined in here. It was a pleasure having everyone here. So, and thanks for the conversation, and see you next time. And please don't forget to evaluate this event. All right, see you next time.